I'd like to make one comment regarding the use of the putting together a bibliography or a compilation of various studies that have been done. And I think this holds true for all four of the groups. And I'm not going to change hats and speak as the chairman of the Performing Arts Medicine Association's research committee. We maintain a bibliography of performing arts medicine that currently has approximately 6,500 articles, books, newspaper interviews, many publications, both peer-reviewed and none, in both artistic and musical fields, and dance fields, by the way, because we cover the whole area. And this ultimately I think, is going to be an excellent place to go for looking into all of these things. The PAMA website currently is being revised with a major revision underway that ultimately will include the bibliography as a direct part of the website and not as a link. Currently, the link is not functioning. We've been taken off, and we're also working to arrange new search capabilities for this bibliography on what will ultimately be the PAMA website. I can't tell you at this point exactly when it will be up and running. It's currently in beta testing, but as you want to look into this over the next 6 weeks to 2 months, and ideally we should have something out by that time, www.artsmed, ARTSMED.org, and click on the link, and ultimately you should be able to get there. Our committee is continuing to enlarge the bibliography, and we add an average of 600 to 700 items per year. So we're trying to stay up with it, and we hope it'll be of use eventually once it can be up and running. Thank you.
Bill, was that the bibliography that used to be on the Sailor site? Or yeah. Does that include publications from music ad journals like Journal of Research?
Everyone we can find. JRME, the British journals, everything, as well as instrument-specific journals, Journal of Music Therapy, and wherever we can find an article that is related to performing arts medicine, although it be rather distant, and we're talking about now very heavily the neurobiology of music. A lot is going on in these last few years on that. But yes, we try to get everything. You get an article in your local newspaper or in your college magazine that appears to be appropriate. And all of this is fodder for our database. And I have a committee of 7 people total that are keeping a series of eyes open for this. So we're doing our darndest, and we hope it'll keep useful.
Thank you.
Question, I'm not sure whether it's the education section or the research section, but where you were referring to diagnostic skills, and you mentioned in particular visual and auditory diagnostic skills. I would add to that tactile and mechanical. Tactile may be more readily addable at this point, but I think as long as we're looking to the future, we ought to consider that in something like 10 years or 20 years, electromyography might get easier to use, and that can turn out, especially once there's more research on the ground in terms of what the ideal patterns of movement are, that may be very helpful as a diagnostic. We've got things like Yamaha disc claviers and video cameras, and the combinations of those can be very fruitful. In terms of the tactile feedback, just having a student playing on your arm instead of on the keyboard can reveal a lot about depth of stroke, speed of attack, whether the vector is pulling away from the keyboard or going toward the keyboard. And I would imagine similar things can apply for bowing of stringed instruments, for key function for wind instruments, et cetera. So I'd like not to bypass those categories as well.
Thank you.
If I could also just mention that in addition to what PAMA offers on their website, MTNA, Music Teachers National Association, also has an annotated bibliography online. It's www.mtna.org, and if you just in the little search box put in wellness bibliography, it is annotated. It's books, journals, websites, and it lists at the end of the annotation to what audience that was designed for. The book or the website. It's very, very helpful. It is added to every year, and right now it is searchable Just recently, it is now searchable and contains several hundred, maybe as many as 500 entries.
Thank you, Gail.
Next. Coming. Final presentation before the summarization will be the mental health group. And the chairperson for this needs no introduction, but Hildegard from the University of North Texas is the coordinator for this group.
I'm just not very comfortable behind the lectern because they're always too tall for me. So I much rather see you a little closer, but you will get my teammates later to speak, and they will speak from the table. The mental health group, my goodness, that's quite a topic. And as I was listening yesterday to the mental experts, the mental health experts, I got very intimidated. And my team members tell me to let you know that we bordered to being very mentally unwell while we were working on this. My team members are, and you see them there, Jana Fallon had already to leave, unfortunately. We have tried to work as best as we know how on a subject that, as we look at ourselves, we feel we have a lot of work to do ourselves. And we have some recommendations to make, and I'll come to that in a minute. But I think there's one point that we have to point out because it struck us as participants in this conference. Everybody in the presentations has acknowledged that it is time to get rid of the mind-body split imagery, yet we are not rid of it. Our language shows that we are not rid of it. We don't know exactly how to bridge the gap between the language used in the sciences and the languages used in the humanities. It's nice that we can talk about the cochlea and everybody knows what we are talking about, and as soon as we say musicianship, everybody has another idea in mind. That is symptomatic for the field, and that is symptomatic for the problems we may have in ultimately bridging these two worlds, and we should not fool ourselves. It's easy to teach the children about the cochlea, but it's much harder to tell them what to do not to damage it. And so I would like out of this then to bring us to a point that has been on my mind a long time, and I have shared it with Chris, and he told me to make sure to tell you, so here I am. We have, particularly in music schools, I believe, created an atmosphere of music schools being temples within which we worship music that can't do any harm. It is almost like the mathematicians allow for a minus in their world of thinking. We do not seem, as a profession, to allow the minus to be a part of our reality. Sociologists would say our gesture is that of always saying music is good. And in the name of music being good, we have done a lot of harm because we have said in order to perceive how good music is, we have to push ourselves and you, our students, harder, because otherwise the people out there will not know how good music is. This is a challenge that we are facing. We have to rethink not just who we are, but the culture that we are representing. And I find that to be an enormous challenge. And I get kind of humble thinking about it. And so did my teammates. They got very humble. And it was Peggy who reminded us of something the airlines have taught us. But before I go to that, and you may wonder what that is, for one thing, we don't get fed anymore in airlines, but that's another story. But it does add to stress when you travel, let me point that out. We could not possibly have come up with any better recommendations than the mental group yesterday in the, if you haven't seen them in the end of your book, pretty much, there are preliminary recommendations by the mental health experts directed specifically toward students, toward faculty, and toward colleges. We endorse each and every one of them. Now, endorsing is one thing. Acting upon the recommendations is another. And as we looked at them, we decided, and this is where the airlines come in, before we tell others what to do, why don't we take a look at ourselves first? The airlines tell us when the pressures in the cabin should not be what it needs to be and those masks come down. Put the mask on yourself first and then on the child, because you cannot help the child if you are about to faint. The same is true, we believe, with mental health issues. And so we have chosen for today's session only to look at ourselves as faculty members, because so many times the stresses our students experience have been induced by us. And they have been induced by us because we are stressed and mentally unwell as well. And we'll talk later on about why. But that reciprocal stress is really what we believe is at the core of the culture that we have to change. And so we have, at this point, only looked at ourselves to understand this is phase one of many phases to come. And we have divided then our areas of what we would prefer not to call mental health as much as we would like to call it mental wellness, into three different areas, and we will speak to them. The intrapersonal, which is about us. The interpersonal, which is about us in relationship to everybody else around us, and we'll talk about that. And finally, that which we need to do and be as professionals, as career people, as musicians. And sometimes the fact that those three things are as connected as they are causes a lot of problems as well, and that's another time for another conference. We begin with the intrapersonal because of what the airlines told us to do. We have to look at ourselves and what we need to do in order to be mentally well ourselves. That has to do with self-care, critical reflection, resiliency, you see them on the board, time management. How many times have our students become pressured because our time management was faulty? How many times, and I'm still a performing chorister, how many times is the stress of my choral conductor imposed on me, even though I had nothing to do with him not planning the program correctly? This is a major problem, I believe, in our interactions with others. And out of this culture that I was talking about earlier comes the issue of reframing what we mean by perfect. We have to understand our own limits of perfection in order not to push our students to a perfection that is impossible to achieve. And an example I want to give before we move on, please think about it carefully. Everything that we put out nowadays in recordings is managed. There are no live performances to speak of. But it is the live performance that we then, or it's the recorded performances that we use as the model for what we want to achieve in the live performance. That is impossible to do. But we do it. That is a source of major stress and mental unwellness, and a source of major problems with not reframing perfectionism. It's a big issue. We have to go on. We are moving now because, we could talk about it, but then we all know what we are talking about here. Let's move to the interpersonal. Interpersonal has to do really with communicating with all the groups that we are part of in a way that shows that we understand their language. We don't do very well at that. We usually would like others to speak our language. And then we get all stressed out when they don't understand us. But how much have we tried to do the opposite, if that is what this is about? Now, to clarify that further, we can maybe talk about it later. I do think it's a matter of language and of empathy, and we'll see. Let's move on to the third, the wellness in terms of who we are as professionals and as career-seeking individuals. And here we have 4 points that will be spoken to by my teammates. And Roger Warner is the first to start on clarity of standards.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Just to clarify before we go on with this, I'm the one with the black eye. I want to quell all rumors. Number one, I was not in a bar fight. Number two, my wife didn't clobber me. I lost a race to my 4-year-old grandson. So that is why I have what I have. I think this moves into a very clarity of standards. I think for us, for our own wellness, we need to understand and align ourselves with the institutions and all of the areas in which we work. First of all, I look at it as 5 basic different areas. The institutional standards, the School of Music standards, the departmental standards, and the area K through 12 music program standards, the real world, and the sets and aligned class standards, hopefully that we're setting and aligning class standards and content objectives to these. These are 5 areas. They're very interconnected. For us, we need to, as teachers, understand what these institutional standards are and the cultures that are really occurring in those. And also to be able to provide ownership to those institutional standards and not sit and be critical of them. If you're critical of them, yes, you have to be critical, but you do not to the point that it creates a negativity in your thinking. If you want to change something at some point, you have to understand it completely before you try to induce any changes as a faculty member. The School of Music, you need to be very understanding of what's going on in the school, in your own School of Music, out of your department. We interface and interconnect with virtually all of the other music faculty. We are probably the ones that have the best possibility of providing input and receiving input from them that ultimately passes on to our students. We need to certainly be aware of our departmental standards and support those. We need to be very supportive of and aware of what's happening out in the real world. Often we can set our own standards and our own objectives, and if they're not aligned with and not doing anything to work with the real world out there, we're at a disconnect. So I think it's very important that we do that.
Thank you. We're following up with Christian on music teacher burnout.
Thank you. In addition to many of the issues that have been presented so far at the conference regarding mental health, there is quite a substantial body of research literature on the topic of teacher burnout. The majority of this literature majority of the research has been conducted at the K-12 level, although it's also appropriate to us as teachers of teachers. The term burnout has been defined as a crisis of overworked and disillusioned educators, and it can be influenced by classroom challenges, including student behavior problems and lack of teaching experience. Music education research suggests that music teachers may face some unique problems. These may include large class sizes, extracurricular responsibilities, and itinerant teaching schedules. So I would challenge us as teachers of teachers to look at our music education students and to consider whether some of these issues may be stressors for our students. What will it be like to handle classroom management with a 100-piece band? What will it be like to have Friday night football games? Do I want to enter this profession? Yes, you do, but there are ways we can help you deal with this, and we can help them get ready for those. And also to consider ways that these stresses might interact with what they're already experiencing as part of everyday college life. And again, to go back to Hildegard's point, that this is something that we also need to look at ourselves. I find it sometimes ironic to be thinking about burnout, and my wife reminds me, maybe you should calm down a little bit. You're working too much on this burnout topic. So it's good for us to think about.
Thank you very much. And then finally, on music performance anxiety and institutional-based stress, Steve Jinsky.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk just briefly on these two, and also talk briefly on some areas that we can look at in terms of supporting each other in looking to further research in the area of mental health for musicians. First, looking at musical performance anxiety, there have been a number of research studies that have looked at this problem, and if you're not already aware of the LeBlanc model, the 11-step hierarchical model by Al LeBlanc of Michigan State. Excuse me. This is a great starting point. And it talks about everything from family history to performance setting to preparation to the act of performance and the evaluation after the performance. It's a relatively comprehensive model, and I think this would be a good point to start with collaboration. Mm-hmm. Now, the second topic that's listed here, institutionally based stress, is a particular interest of mine, and I think it brings up a whole research agenda. And I'm going to just switch over to the research. And by the way, we did not get a chance to discuss research because there were so many other things that we were talking about. So this is, you'll see it's on a slide that's not affiliated necessarily with the group. So first, let's take a look at some research collaboration that we might consider with the mental health community. I've mentioned already the institutional sources of stress, and I'm going to mention some specifics in a second. But I think we can work with our mental health colleagues and using their expertise, look at the incidence of mental health issues among music students, the effectiveness of intervention strategies, and look at interrelationship personality conflicts. Now, institutional-based sources of stress are things that are just part of students' lives, such things as ensemble policies and overcommitment of time, jury examinations, in music ed degree programs, overloads of credit hours, and bureaucratic stressors, placements, even such things as scholarships and how they influence the stress. The last thing, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, is if we look at some of the research that's already out there, we can really expand on what we're talking about. For example, the research of Brian Roberts on socialization and the Woodford article in the new handbook on looking at interpersonal areas in mental health, or at least interpersonal areas that could be applied. The self-regulation of music student learning chapter in the new handbook by Gary McPherson. And I've already mentioned the music performance anxiety model and the work in burnout, much of which has been done and has been relatively well developed. So that's all for me.
There's a lot of room for more discussion and for more conferences, I guarantee it. All this needs to be implemented. And how are we going to implement it? Since we, in this session, have decided to focus on ourselves, we suggest we begin by understanding ourselves more as role models and coaches. And on that, Peggy Bennett has a few words to say.
I'm speaking from here. Don tells me I have 1 minute. Here it goes. 3 points. One is I think that we can start by the thought of be the wellness. What I mean by that is that if we feel the role, if we become the model for mental health, we take that on. And secondly, we strive to arrive at mental wellness. Mental health! Oh, now there was an unintentional slip. I just gave up 30 seconds of my 1 minute there.
That's okay.
We don't arrive and stay at wellness. But if we look at it that each day we go into our classroom, each time we have a conference in our office, each time we encounter students, then we can attempt to be the wellness. The second point is to talk the wellness. And by this I mean share in informal and sometimes formal ways what you've learned about your own sense of wellness and decision making by posing to students, I wonder if, or have you thought of, or what would happen if, so that through inquiry and talking aloud, you're sharing your own wisdom of your own wellness with your students. And the third and final point I would make harkens back to what Hildegard said earlier, and this is a question. Does music really make us gooder? I think it's an important question for us to consider. We have for so many years been reading about and hearing about and talking about music is good. If music is good, then music makers, musicians, must be gooder than the general population. If musicians are gooder, then the better musicians they are, the gooder people they are. Think of the implications for that kind of orientation and what implications those thoughts have for our students' mental wellness as well as our mental wellness.
And I conclude, to be continued. Thank you. Thank you.
Would you be so kind as to relinquish your microphone?
We can. I'm getting so used to it. It's nice.
I didn't see anyone writing down the new vocabulary words that you just heard. Okay, you going to do this for me, or? Music ed summary, mental health. That's yours.
No, no. I don't want to be known for that.
Where am I, Bob? Is that me? Oh, I'm up there. Is that it? Oh, I was thinking that music ed. No, no. No, no. No, it's not there. That's it, I think. Try that. Yep, bingo. Okay, technology is wonderful, right? This is, oh, we're going to have questions now? No, there will be opportunity as soon as I finish. A whole half hour. Can you? Well, a whole 23 minutes. Correction. Don will be in charge of that. Our music education panel consists of myself from Blue Valley School District, and you may or may not know that district, but it's a suburban district near Kansas City. And I've been there and the neighboring district for quite some time, so most all of my experience has been at this K-12 level. And I just happen to be president of MENC at this time. John Floor from Texas Women's University, Don Hodges, who everybody knows, Bob Lawrence. Did Bob make it? Bob had somewhat of a crisis, I guess, a stress incident at his school that he had to go take care of this morning. And then Clifford Madsen, who was not able to be here. This is going to be kind of a summation, and I decided to start out with this in the form of questions. How does the information from these 2 days impact music educators? What's the message to be delivered to music educators? Not only what is the message, but how are we going to accomplish that? How should college and university music majors be educated to first recognize the warning signs, prevent injuries to themselves, and also apply appropriate remedies and where to go for help when they do have problems? And what should be the balance between the two extremes of overreaction and complacency and apathy? This came up in our discussions because as Hildegard had mentioned, there's been a great emphasis on the good part, or I guess that was Peggy was mentioning this, the good part. And for a long time, and you probably can relate to this, the reason I think, and having been in this some 40 years, the reason for that is because we've been fighting for acceptability and legitimacy and credit so that we're not just a peripheral kinds of icing on the cake that can be dispensed with, but we have been looking for those things that give us that academic credibility, if you will. So the idea is not to forget that in light of that, yes, music participation can have some health problems and some other kinds of issues with it. So someplace between the extreme of not addressing this and over-addressing it, the balance should be there. So what's the impact of this conference on music education? Music teachers and their students are susceptible to potential injuries about which they know very little and are therefore ignored. I have 55 teachers on my staff, and prior to coming to Blue Valley, I was in Shawnee Mission and had about 85 teachers on that staff at one time. And this issue of health and wellness for themselves and for their students never came up. Music teachers and their students may be their own worst enemies regarding potential injury because of their dedication. How many of you have been, and we won't use the clickerless clickers here, but how many of you have taught in the public schools, K-12? Okay, put your hands down. How many of you came to school when you weren't feeling well? Raise your hand. See, you're over-dedicated. I have teachers that do this regularly, and then there are some of their colleagues, none that I know of in the music department, that take mental health days from time to time when they probably don't need them, who do other things and take a sick leave day when they really don't need them. But my music staff, they are so dedicated. In some cases, they're almost their own worst enemies as far as it goes with their health. Because when they're having a sore throat, if they don't have a temperature, they'll come to school and teach all day, and then maybe do something at night. Health risks are real, and we've learned that. But we've also learned that they can be avoided. Injury can have devastating and often career-ending effects on teachers. I think you all raised your hand earlier. Someone asked the question, how many of you have known teachers who've had to leave the profession because of voice problems? One of our secretaries in our district office sounds like this, literally. She was a music teacher, had voice trouble, had to give up teaching, and now she's a secretary. Not that there's anything against secretaries, and she's an excellent secretary, but having that satisfaction of working with kids in the classroom in music, she does not have. Injury can deprive students of a life of enjoyment and enrichment in music. And as we've heard and seen, there's a growing body of information available regarding the health risk of music from vastly diverse sources, and that needs to be assimilated, coordinated, and disseminated to the people in the profession. So what's the message that music educators, we believe, and I'm talking myself now, should take from this conference? The teachers currently in the classrooms need to be educated about prevention and remedies regarding injury in themselves. This is a little different focus, I think, than what maybe what Chris had in mind in focusing on the university level. But I see this from my perspective is there are so many teachers out in the classrooms now that don't have this information. And if this information can be disseminated to them, it can make a large impact more quickly. Teacher training curriculum, this is why we're here, needs to include information regarding risk prevention and remedies. And I'm sure that will all get resolved this afternoon, right, Chris? Yeah. With a group like this, with those clickers, I mean, you can knock it out in 10 minutes probably. This is an important one that I was glad to see mentioned in some of our groups, because I see this from the K-12 perspective, not from most of your perspectives, that health risks can be avoided, and health risks, I'm sorry to say, are often contributed to by the environment in which the teachers teach. And not only the environment, but the schedules that they have, the workloads that they have. A standard workload for an elementary music teacher, classroom music teacher in my district is 25 sections of classes. Well, 25 or 26, depends on whether I can push them down a little bit or not. So that means each of those teachers, when you meet them twice a week for 30 minutes, there's 52 class sessions. So when you divide that by 10, there's 10 classes that they have to meet every day. One of the people, one of the division presidents, when I asked them for questions in response to this, said that not only is the schedules a health issue, but she says, I have 2 or 3 teachers a year who come down with bladder infections because they don't have breaks in their class time to go to the potty, for goodness sakes. So, I have 7 daughters, and I never even thought about that. But boards of education and principals, depending on that schedule, depending on the workload, depending on the facilities, can make a difference. I hope you all are enjoying this little animation that I stuck in here. Most of them were just up and there, but we got to move, right? Message to teachers, music majors, principals, boards of education, again, is a balanced message that yes, music is good for you, yes, music is beneficial, and yes, too much of anything, and I think this is on a later slide, too much of anything can be good. Even something that's good, too much of it cannot be good. We need sunlight, right? If you stay out in the sun too long, that's not good. Talk to the people from Florida. We need water, we need air, but if you have too much air and too much water all at once, hurricanes, that's not good. So we need a balanced approach. Human body is a delicate, integrated whole. We've heard this several times. In all areas of human existence, excesses can be and often are harmful, even in our beloved profession. We differ in our resistance. We've heard this several times. Susceptibility to injury. Teachers must be aware of and alert to their own susceptibilities to injury, as well as those of their students in the 4 areas that we've discussed: voice, musculoskeletal, hearing, and mental. I think as you create your PowerPoints, I think that's called swirl or skirl or something like that. Technological advances have significantly improved the diagnostic accuracy and potential harmful environments and availability of access to information resources. Is somebody hungry? My God, I don't know what that was, Bob, but it wasn't. Oh, it was outside? Okay. I thought, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. Back to the subject. More use should be made of these technologies. We can now determine what the decibel levels are. We can now determine what the hearing levels are. So those kinds of technologies need to be made available, need to be used, as well as access on the internet. Okay, and I tell the National Executive Board this from time to time. It's nice to talk about stuff. We can talk until we're blue in the face, but unless we do something, changes really aren't going to occur. So what is it you are going to do? This is what I feel like our group kind of came to the conclusions that research needs to be done. More research needs to be done. Yes, it is being done, but causes, prevention, and remedies as well. That information, that data gathered, needs to be disseminated through these various sources, professional publications, and by that I don't mean just music professional publications, but MENC has developed some relationships with the Principals Association. We have a strong relationship with the National Association of School Boards. Those kinds of publications need to get the word out as well. Teacher training curriculum, which we've already talked about. And my feeling is, from a recipient standpoint, is that publications targeting students and parents needs to be one kind of publication. Publications targeting administrators and boards of education, those decision makers that make decisions that affect how teachers work and the results that they have to put up with, need to be targeted as well. Rather than one publication fits all, they need to be specialized in those particular areas. Conventions, conferences, symposia, websites, and those kinds of things. So additionally, what can we do? Creation of materials for staff development. And as I said when I started off, we see this conference as being both applicable at the university and college level and also the K-12 level. And I am always looking for good ideas in staff development for my teachers. Don't get a lot of time to do it, but I'm looking for those materials. I told someone just after the voice session Thursday morning, I had enough material for 5 years of staff development in-service training for my teachers. We need things on voice, covering these items. We need materials put together for that we can give to teachers, to school districts, to supervisors like myself on hearing, the risk, how to avoid them, prevention, sources, and remedies. This is a good word, neuromusculoskeletal information. And this is probably, and all of these apply, I think, maybe not equally well, but to voice teachers, choral teachers need more than just the voice information and the hearing information. Instrumental people should not disregard the voice information. How many times have you, of course they've got amplification now, but seen directors overusing, instrumental directors, orchestra directors overusing their voices as well. So how to prevent musculoskeletal problems. Minta. Oh, there it is. Risk, how to avoid problems, prevention resources, and sometimes, there again, teachers can be their own worst problem. When it comes to putting pressure on yourself to compete or pressure on yourself to do a good job. So that's the Music Education Panel's report. I have one last statement that didn't make it on the slide because I just added it yesterday, but I would close with this, and then Don's going to Sounds like church. I was going to say, Don's going to lead us in some questions. I guess that's not it. But I would close with this quote that I heard a long time ago, and I think it's applicable maybe with one changing of one word. But if not me, who? If not us, who? If not now, when? So thank you very much, and Don, take it over.
For those of you who have questions, if you want to come on up to the microphone.
You want this?
And Bob, if you can get we had the question ready for the little clicker things. So while Bob's getting ready, if you have a question, come on up. Panel members, there's too many to get all up here, but if you want to come on up some or not, we'll find you where you are. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and vote on this while we are getting questions ready. So if you would think about who should take on the primary role in schools of music for handling this issue, and go ahead and vote. People are saying they want to do 5. All right, press 5 for all the above. I don't know if we can do that or not, but is it too late to do that now? Okay. Yeah, let's say it's a forced choice that yes, it would be nice for everybody, but who's taking leadership? All right. Since it says music administrators, I'm going to ask Rex Woods and John Deal if you'd come on up, and I saw that Jim Scott just left in time, I guess, but if you all would come on up. And in the meantime, if you have some questions over here, you all have some questions while they're coming up. And you can ask of anybody on.
I just really wanted to make a statement in response to the mental health subcommittee of your committee. First of all, I'm very pleased to hear that our recommendations made sense to you all. And secondly, I want to say I'm really impressed with the openness to looking at self-reflection that the mental health subcommittee's comments reflected. And thirdly, I think we now all have the new term of hellness, which I really liked. And I would say that from the mental health group subcommittee or committee perspective, we remember here Carl Jung talking about integrating the shadow. So I think we have to acknowledge hellness within wellness.
My question is for the vocal health that just talked about vocal health and music education. Are you considering when you talk about vocal health with teachers, the use of amplification and research on that specific to music teachers? As that's been done for general ed, but not for music teachers.
We did talk about that. I think that one of the considerations there is we were looking at what are the things that are the most practical on the front end, the most simple, elegant solutions. And frankly, if we do the best pre-service in terms of teaching people how to advocate for themselves, they will not automatically go to amplification, but will have good skills. And the amplification would be solving a problem rather than looking at things on the front end. I do think there are purposes for amplification. Obviously, we're using them in here, and if we weren't using amplification today, we would not be perceiving the information as well, nor would we be without vocal stress. So the amplification is an issue that we do need to look at. I do think, however, if we defaulted to those things that we feel are the most likely to be able to be implemented quickly, efficiently, with the least amount of cost, and to be accepted by teachers in the field. And that was really one of the criteria we were using.
If I can just add real quick, like basically to put it in a nutshell, is that if the teacher is having vocal problems, any type of amplification isn't going to help.
Thank I guess I've read a lot of research about vocal health, and in general ed, amplification has had greater results than teaching them vocal health methods in some of those studies I've read. Have you also considered using technology to measure vocal load for music teachers? That's my other. There's a device that they can wear that measures how much they're speaking and measuring that with the loudness levels in the room.
I'm not familiar with that, although I would assume it's some type of a dosimeter. I've actually done some research where we had dosimeters on the teachers and then in the classrooms, and we did find that actually the noise level was significantly louder on the teacher, which made us think that the teacher was creating their own sound as much as anything, because it was not close to the recordings. So I think we need to understand that teachers, just as the response that we talked about for hearing, that if you hum, it changes what your ears do in terms of protecting. I think that teachers automatically will use loud voices to maintain signal-noise ratio. And even if we give them amplification, they still may automatically try to compensate for signal-noise ratio. And so we really, if we are going to use amplification, we have to teach them how to do that.
I might add to that. Bob, can you get my purple on here? Is that I have observed primarily secondary, although it's elementary as well, middle school and high school teachers, and when I go in to do evaluations and assessment, is to tell the choral teachers, stop singing. They will sing with their choirs all the time. Middle school kids, generally, the teachers will sing the tenor part because they don't have enough tenors. Some high school teachers, males and females, will sing a part that is not as strong as they want to hear it, so they will sing, so they overuse their voice. And it's a simple thing, is stop singing. And I tell them two things. One, you're going to save your voice. And number two, when you're singing, you can't really hear what the choir sounds like. So be quiet and listen, because the ears are what you're really hearing. So that just cuts down on the use as well.
Okay, we've been talking all week or the last couple of days about risk factors, and I'm about to do the riskiest thing that you've seen anybody do so far, because I'm about to ask some music administrators to weigh in on the issue. So we have Rex Wood from the University of Arizona, and John Deal from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and James Scott from here at UNT. And as you saw in our panel response here just a while ago, over 70% of the people here think that you all should take the lead in all this. So we're going to give you the opportunity to say whether you think you should, or how you should, or why you shouldn't, or how you feel about all this.
Well, Don, this is very risky for you, I have to admit. No, I knew this was going to happen. Don's a very effective faculty member and does not blindside the dean, and keeps the dean informed of everything that he's doing, so he's quite the model here. I agree that administrators need to take the lead role in this, and a number of sessions here have focused on NASM and their standards, and I don't want to say too much about NASM, or don't want to be representative of NASM, but I can assure you that NASM standards and guidelines are determined by their members, which are your administrators, us. So I think the most intelligent thing for you all to do when you leave this conference is make an appointment as soon as possible with your administrator, whether it's a dean or director or whatever the name of the person is, or the title of the person is, and sit down and talk with them about some of these issues. Change comes about through a number of means. One of the most important criteria for change is a compelling reason to change. And we've seen some compelling arguments and some compelling information over the last couple of days that may be a little bit alarming to your chairs, deans, directors, and certainly does not affect everybody in the school. So I appreciated seeing the notion of balance, of being alarmist versus reactionary and so on and so forth, and dealing with issues of awareness. So I think it's important for you to have conversations with your administrators and follow through and follow up with the information that you've talked about and heard about here. I don't think there's an administrator in the NASM organization who is not receptive to this or probably is unaware of this. I know that NASM is very receptive to its member institutions, and during evaluations and visits, I know that if I have a problem in my school with an environmental or acoustical problem, all I have to do is tell the visiting panel from NASM, and that gets put into the report that goes to my chancellor. So I know that that is a very strong pipeline and a very good advocate for what you do in your schools. So my piece of advice is to go back home and talk with your administrators. Let them know the information. They probably know it already. Most of them do. And that's the way to initiate some changes and some curricular issues. Remember the old saying, though? Changing the curriculum is like moving a graveyard.
Some symbolism there.
I'll try not to be repetitive of what John was saying. I agree with absolutely everything that he has said. And as someone who has done a number of NASM evaluations, we do find this to be a very useful tool in bringing about change. And the kinds of environments that we've seen a number of times in music schools that are definitely dangerous for students and faculty to work in, the NASM evaluation process can be effective. Concerning curriculum, this would be one place that I would defer a little bit to, and perhaps disagree that administrators can be the primary agent of change. Basic to the whole concept of governance in our institutions is the principle that the curriculum belongs to the faculty. As administrators, we can do everything that we can to create a culture of change and examination of what we're doing. Ultimately, though, it will be faculty committees, curriculum committees, various divisional or sub-departmental groups and so forth that will look at individual course content, the curriculum that we require of all of our students, and as administrators, we can certainly be advocates, we must be advocates, but there is something that needs to be done within the culture of the faculty. I think there's an analogy here to an experience that I had a few years back in Vienna when I was talking with the vice rector of a university there about an exchange program. And he said, all of this is very encouraging and I would look forward to this, but we can plan the best exchange program in the world, but it's not going to happen until my faculty and your faculty begin working together and want this to take place. So the ferment that needs to exist within the faculty is an essential part of this as well. And I would encourage everyone to operate on that level as well.
I agree with both of those things, using the academic program reviews and accreditation reviews as an agent of change. I also think that one of the best things that an administrator can do is to facilitate bringing together the stakeholders, the people on campus who can put together the interdisciplinary alliances. And in fact, one of the buzzwords in hiring around the country right now is that of cluster hires. At least at our institution, cluster hires are receiving, in many cases, a higher priority than if I propose a new line in bassoon, for example. If that bassoon is somehow connected to natural history and over here in the humanities, the sciences, if we have 3 or 4 people who want to use this person in some way, we have a much better chance of having that recruitment plan approved. And so right now, part of the reason that I'm here is recognizing that responsibility is ahead to bring together resources on campus, and the dean of our medical school, the chair of graduate studies who has a particular interest in vocal health and vocal dysfunctions, have come together and are exploring the opportunities of working together, recognizing that there is, this is a favorable thing on our campus to do cluster kinds of hires. I agree also that, that the faculty own the curriculum and that they are the experts, and together will produce the very strongest, the very best materials, the very best training sequences. And I also know that when that sort of pressure comes top down instead of from the faculty and upward, that very often that initiative is marginalized and doesn't receive the funding or the support from the rest of the faculty over the long haul. So it's really best if this can be initiated within the faculty. I think that we can help in our mentoring of faculty, and particularly junior faculty who are eager to build their promotion and tenure dossiers, by making whatever resources we have available in research dollars and faculty development dollars available to encourage projects that are specific to this domain.
Okay, any other final questions before we have lunch? Anybody? Last thing. All right, thank you very much. It's time for lunch.
I got the signal.
Yeah, right.